Hello everyone, I'm back. I'm still trying to figure out my new video upload system. I thought I had downloaded a new program, a new installed system for making videos. It gave me one try and seems to not be working, so I have to call the call the website tomorrow to see what's going on. But I did want to make this video tonight. So I want to talk about the mass deportation of illegal immigrants that Trump supposedly has going underway, although I hope it doesn't just get blocked and make no progress like many of his other programs. Now, if you remember, in the 2016 presidential campaign, yes, controlling illegal immigration was a major platform of Donald Trump's because Americans were asking for it. They were crying out for it. They were begging for it. We know there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions even, of illegal immigrants coming into our country, mostly from the southern border. Now it looks like through every border, as well as they are in Canada. And of course, Jar Jar Trudeau can do nothing rational, even though many Canadians, in fact, the majority of Canadians are begging for a control to illegal immigration. But the left and the leftist media, I mean, all the media, all the mainstream media really is leftist propaganda anymore, insists on calling the desire for controlling immigration actually maintaining borders as symbolic of hate or a message of hate. No, it is simply wanting to control who is allowed to come into your country, who you want, who you don't want. Look, every country in the world does this. Every country has an absolute right to do this. In the ancient world, when cities were being built, when the walls were around the city were first being constructed, if an opponent, even if they had previously been a friend of the rulers in their previous life, or I guess previous career, although I don't know how often they would have had what you can call careers at that point, and kind of depends. But if they would step over the wall rather than walking in through the gates, it meant they were invading, it meant they were an aggressive force, and so they got driven out or killed. This is what top predators, apex predators in nature will do. A lion, a pride of lions, a tiger, a wolf pack, a bear, a jaguar, killer whales, Tyrannosaurus rex back in the Cretaceous. They will establish territories and boundaries. They will mark their boundaries. If a rival comes into that territory and they do not get the message or they ignore the message that that territory is claimed, that territory is established, what does the top predator do? What does the apex predator, who is trying to protect their territory and very likely their family, what do they come and do? Well, they drive them off, and if the rival persists, they kill them. Now, no one in America or the West is asking for illegal immigrants to be killed. We are asking for control over our borders. That is a perfectly rational desire to have. In fact, it's very important for the continued existence of any country in any capacity, really. Because if you can't define your borders, if people just come in and out as they please, where does your country begin and end? Yeah, that's very important to define. Now, we often ask, why does the left not understand this? I think they actually do understand it. They just think their agenda of piling people into Western countries for votes and to vote for socialism, to vote them in power, so far supersedes in their twisted minds any actual duty to protect the people to which they are actually elected in office to govern, although really more end up bullying. You understand? It's not a question of do they understand it. They're perfectly capable of understanding it. They choose not to because their agenda is more important to them than actual responsibility to their own people. And that's what an addiction to power does. So I came across this article tonight after I got back from CNC machinist class. I'm about 3 out of 4 months through that now. The article from MSN News, written by Arilis Hernandez, big surprise, and Antonio Olivio, is titled, "With White House Threatening Mass Raids, Undocumented Immigrants Try to Stay Out of Sight." And I will provide a link to the article in the video description below as soon as I do get this uploaded. And I will read. I am reading from the article itself, so this is a direct quote. "A Salvadoran widower who came to this country, the United States, as a child no longer visits the post office or other government buildings. A Guatemalan mother of 2 hasn't left her home in suburban Maryland except to buy necessities since hearing about President Trump's tweet late Monday. The president's proclamation that federal agents will start rounding up families in the country illegally and deporting them by the thousands has accelerated the fear that has built for more than 2 years among the nation's estimated 10.5 million undocumented residents, according to immigrants, advocates, and public officials." So before we go any further, I want to make a couple of things clear. First of all, when they talk about undocumented, it would be very important to define whether these are people in question in any time you're talking about undocumented residents or undocumented immigrants. Are these people who are going through the legal process of becoming American citizens, and this would go for any other country as well, who simply have not acquired the documents yet, or are these people who have specifically broken the law to come and live here because of their own economic wants or other reasons they may have, but they broke the law to come here, meaning that they're already criminals? That is what illegal immigrants means. It means you came into this country illegally, which means by logic, you have no protection granted to you by American law, by the Constitution, because you have already shown that you do not consider yourself under the jurisdiction thereof. This is why the language is important. This is why terms are important. This is why when people are in debates, people usually at the right, because they're the the only ones holding on to the rationality, will say, you need to define what the terms mean, what the terms that you are using mean. Language is very important. And defining who you are talking about is very important anytime you're talking about a topic of any seriousness. So I did go through this article before making this video, and it seems very clear, it is very clear that they are specifically talking about people who broke the law to get here, which means they have no protections. I keep reading on. Parents are vowing to keep their children out of summer programs. Shopping trips are consolidated to limit driving. Migrants without papers are avoiding large crowds and minimizing going out at night and even attending church. It terrorizes me very much to hear they're going to do mass raids, said Yadira, the Guatemalan mother in Prince George's. Like other undocumented immigrants interviewed, she declined to give her full name. If I drive, the police can stop me for any small reason, and they'll see I don't have documents, and they'll arrest me. She said, thank God the school year is over for my oldest son, because now I don't have to go out so much. So rather than have actually taken the time to go through the legal process of immigration, you crossed the border illegally, you came here illegally, and now you're complaining about having to hide from people who might want to deport you because you came illegally? In what other country could you pull this off? Well, except Western countries, because Western country leadership has all been wussified. For months, officials at U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has been planning large-scale raids targeting families, but were taken aback at how soon the action seemed likely to begin. It's been delayed for 2.5 years. It's about time. I'll read on. Despite limited detention space and federal personnel, the government says men, women, and children with final orders of deportation will be swept up in major metropolitan areas across the country. A highly visible attempt to staunch out an unprecedented flow of families across the southern border and discourage would-be migrants from traveling north. Because I think we don't want to encourage or reward breaking the law to come into a country. In the Washington area, where most local governments are protective of undocumented residents, many public officials are vowing not to cooperate with federal raids. How do they have the right to do this? And it's not like this is a hugely immoral law that makes perfect sense to actually take a stand against. No, you can't have people crossing into your country illegally just because they want to live there. That destroys the sense of stability and security in neighborhoods. We welcome immigrants and the vibrancy they bring to our jurisdictions, said a joint statement issued Thursday by Baltimore Mayor Jack Young. Yeah, a lot of these mayors are Democrats, and a lot of these mayors are completely ignoring the responsibility to protect their actual citizens and defend illegal immigrants. It's an obsession with defying Trump that puts American lives at risk for purposes of power, really, for purposes of self-righteousness and power. The Democratic county executives of Maryland's 5 largest counties, including Mark Elrick of Montgomery County and Angela D. Alsobrooks of Prince George's. We stand together in embracing diversity, and our police departments and agency employees will continue to work to ensure that everyone's civil rights are respected. Right, but illegal immigrants have no... Well, I guess they have basic human rights, but they really don't have any American civil rights. And it's not like deporting them violates their basic human rights. Advocates are expanding Know Your Rights seminars and visiting homes in heavily immigrant neighborhoods, passing out flyers in Spanish and other foreign languages that explain what to do if immigration agents approach. This is disgusting. It's a complete shitting in the face of legal American residents, of native-born American residents who have worked hard to build families, to protect their neighborhoods, to build up their communities, all legally, because most of them were born here and have a right to be here, because they are actually subject, and they recognize that they are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. They follow the laws. You can't have people just violating the laws left and right just because they want to live in a nicer neighborhood. It can't work that way. Peaceful societies cannot work that way. I'll read on. People are really frightened, said Hallie Ryan, the managing attorney at Legal Aid Justice Center in Northern Virginia, which joined other groups this week to urge local officials not to cooperate. Not to cooperate with ICE? The arrogance of these leftist social justice losers who think they can shit in the face of American citizens by protecting people who, first of all, have already broken the laws, many of them which do come from violent neighborhoods and carry that violence with them, all for saying, hey, I stood up for someone today, even though it was in a completely immoral way. I would question how logic became so lost in people, but I think a lot of people never really meant to hold to it. An operation like the one President Trump tweeted about is not done without local cooperation. And you owe Trump local cooperation. And local governments have the power to not cooperate with something that serves only to terrorize their local communities. And I think you have your definition of terrorism a little backwards there. The group visited a heavily immigrant apartment complex in Annandale on Thursday, advising about 24 residents not to let strangers inside the building or share any personal details. So they're treating them like children who have to lock the door to strangers at the home, despite the fact that these are people who are actually trying to protect the neighborhoods. It would be easier if you don't even answer their questions and just say, I'm sorry, I'm busy, said Nicholas Meritz, an attorney also with Legal Aid Justice Center. And the fact that so many legal administrations, so many legal offices are involved in this, what does it say about our ability to respect the legal system in America? It doesn't look good. The best protection we have when we're confronted by immigration agents is silence. I find it really difficult to stop commenting. I mean, I know I said I'd just read the article, but this is so arrogant and so common these days. It really does boggle my mind. Do people not care about American families who are born here? Seriously, do they not consider this, that those of us who were born in America, who grew up in America, many of us grew up under divorced parents, families that were ripped apart, would really like to learn how to build stable families of our own, but when our neighborhoods are being flooded with immigrants, many of, maybe not all of whom were sort of violent, but there's certainly everyone who came here illegally is a criminal by coming here illegally. And, well, then we also have every other leftist agenda that's being pushed out there, which I'll make other videos about. How can you navigate a world like this? How can you build and raise a stable family when your neighborhoods are being invaded, when social navigation messages are being completely distorted beyond your ability to puzzle out? And children aren't safe. Neighborhoods aren't safe. The legal administrations, the judicial system, is working against law-abiding citizens. How does that make any sense? But it's happening. How do you work with a world like this? a Honduran woman who spoke on the condition of anonymity, said she had been hunkered down in her stuffy apartment since hearing about Trump's announcement. "It feels like we're prisoners," she said. "You're not prisoners of war. You broke the law to get here, and you're not going to be air raided." After seeing Trump's tweet, Marilyn Dell, I guess that's delegate, or Jocelyn Pinamilik, D. Prince George's, texted other Latino officials in the country asking, "What can we do to get in front of it?" They immediately knew what she meant. Officials in the Washington suburb, where the foreign-born population has nearly doubled since 2000, well, no wonder people are getting pissed off, are working on legislation to limit the participation of local police in immigration matters and prevent discrimination against undocumented immigrants or the denial of services by county agencies. This is not discrimination. This is enforcing a logical, reasonable law. We are trying to walk a fine line that helps people prepare but not cause a panic. Funny how you don't show the same respect towards native-born Americans, said Brendan Wu, an organizer with the DC-based group Sanctuary DMV, which vocally denounced ICE operations last summer that resulted in the arrest and deportation of 12 district residents. "The mere threat of these raids can really wreak havoc in immigrant families," Wu said, "because all of a sudden they are afraid to do things they have to do to live their everyday lives." Well, I wonder how Native Americans feel. And I don't mean Native Americans in the sense of tribes. I mean people born here in America, raised in America, have been citizens since birth, and obey the law. Immigration lawyer Hassan M. Ahmad, big surprise there, said one client of his awaiting approval of a U visa, which is reserved for victims of domestic violence, contacted him in a panic Tuesday, worried that Trump's tweet about the raids meant the application would be revoked. "Nobody knows what to expect," said Ahmad, who works in Loudoun County, Virginia. "We still have a legal system. We still have a system of laws." Yeah, and you ignore those. But it's been hard to give them any sense of peace. Julia Toro, a lawyer in the district, said she worries that people will start leaving the country voluntarily, even when they have strong claims for asylum. I don't think that's how asylum works. I don't think you just get to apply for asylum just because you want to be in a different country. And I mean, if they started leaving the country voluntarily, that would solve some problems. "That's what happened with TPS," said Toro, referring to the Trump administration's unsuccessful attempt to terminate temporary protected status for immigrants from El Salvador, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Sudan. "We don't know what's going to happen, so people need to be well informed." Funny how you couldn't well-informed American children about how to protect their country rationally. Those of us who happen to have learned it later learned on our own, not like school did any good. A weekly legal clinic in Langley Park, Maryland, offered by the immigrant advocacy group CASA, was relatively quiet Tuesday, but advocates expect that to change. In the lobby of the refurbished mansion that serves as CASA's headquarters, "Oh, look, they get a mansion." 3 women waited for their turn with a lawyer. Sounds like they were filing for divorce. They just sure do that often enough. "My prevailing fear is being separated from my children," said a young mother from Peru who was breastfeeding her infant son. She entered the United States illegally 2 years ago, and she said she rethinks that decision each time she watched the news. "It would have helped if you had rethought the decision before you broke the law to come here." She doesn't take her children to the park anymore and rarely ventures out. So again, Children's playtime at the park is ruined by people breaking the law to get into the neighborhoods and people defending people who break the law. This ruins it for everyone. You fear being separated from your children? Well, it'd be nice if you could extend that consideration to fathers who wives unjustly file for divorce against them. Dads who actually want to be in their children's lives but are never allowed to again. Funny how you never worry about their feelings. Or the children's, for that matter. Sitting across from her was Carmen, a 31-year-old Salvadoran who crossed the southern U.S. border on June 1. You mean less than a month ago? Trump's threats regularly make news in her home country, she said. They're not threats, they're basic logic. But they didn't deter her from coming. Again, they are completely shameless in coming here. She said she would make the same decision again if given the chance. Because they don't care about laws. We are suffering so much that we weigh the risk against his words, but the choice is always the same. She said, there is still hope that things are better here. You don't get to come here just because you want a somewhat better living condition or neighborhood condition. You don't get to do that. This is why Americans were pissed off. This is why we wanted Trump as president. Advocates are helping families delegate authority to others to care for their children if they are arrested, CASA attorney Nick Katz said, and identifying safe places to which they can go if they feel threatened. Immigrants are memorizing the telephone numbers of advocates and attorneys. This is what has been a floating anxiety during the past few years. There is now an acute fear, said Austin Almaguer, co-chair of Virginians Organized for Interfaith Community Engagement and pastor of the Vienna Baptist Church in Fairfax County, where 1 in 3 residents are foreign-born. That's fine so long as they're legal. He said some of the group's undocumented members have told him they would not allow their children to attend summer camp or even go to the local library. Well, fine, they shouldn't be using any American services. Fairfax County Board of Supervisors Chairwoman Sharon Belova called Trump's tweet cruel and said that officials will make sure people are aware of the 200,000 legal aid program and that local police officers have nothing to do with us. That's such a terrible mistake. Whether here legally or not legally or somewhere in between, it's important that people trust Fairfax County law enforcement to keep the community safe. Why are they entitled to law enforcement protection if they are here not legally? They shouldn't be. But in neighboring Prince William County, Board of Supervisors Chairman Corey A. Stewart, Republican, and ardent Trump supporters, ICE make arrests. Finally, a competent person. At the same time, Stewart, who lost races for Virginia governor and U.S. senator in the past 2 years, said Trump should focus on deporting undocumented immigrants convicted of crimes unrelated to their immigration status. Well, they're all guilty of at least one crime, coming here illegally. At a center for day laborers in Langley Park, Jesus, 37, the widower from and paying attention to every story. Well, we should pay attention to what's going on in the country. He has developed a plan for his U.S.-born children in case he is arrested, and he avoids government buildings, large crowds, and law enforcement at all costs. I get sad and sick from thinking about this all the time and anticipating la migra, he said, using a Spanish term for U.S. immigration officials. Okay, so he's got U.S.-born children. Now, that means that they are considered U.S. citizens, although clearly that policy has been very much abused. But the first question is legal. Is he a legal citizen or If not, then yeah, he should be deported. And this does cause a terrible responsibility to not put their children in this position. And I think that's the right argument. Being that the system has been very highly abused, it's of course a complete disaster. And we do need an answer to this. I think legal citizens and the parents maybe can begin the documentation for them when they're born, or maybe when they turn 5, or who knows. But some idea, and then the children can finish it when they get into their teenage or adult years. That'll be totally fine. Amy Chkemini, this is her name, Amy Chkemini, a journalist from West Africa, so I probably did pronounce it wrong, but oh well, who is seeking asylum, watched news of Trump's tweet Tuesday and said he was overwhelmed with grief. The president needs to understand that he's not hurting just one person, said Skemmy, who knows about the pronunciation, who was also at the day laborer site and asked the name of his because he feared retribution from the government. So this is just enabling the avoiding of people are avoiding government officials. They are avoiding law. How are you going to create, how are you going to have a law-abiding society when everyone's hiding from the police? Now, normal people, normal law-abiding people in everyday life have very few confrontations ever with the police. You know, there might be a little misunderstanding, or there might be a couple questions asked about a particular incident that went on in your neighborhood once in a while. You may be called for jury. Typically speaking, a law-abiding citizen will have very few problems with the police ever. And so you can have a good relationship with a community and its police department if you have a society where everyone, with very few exceptions, but everyone, you know, basically, or pretty much, follows the law in their everyday lives. There you can have a peaceful society. I don't know where people think the society is going to go when everyone's running and ducking from not only the police, but from immigration officials, from carrying around any sort of documentation, because, you know, if you're already illegal and you get questioned and you don't have documentation, you know, what are you going to do? This is the problem. Now, let me show you something. Hold on, my computer's being slow. I'll just finish this couple sentences in the meantime. The president needs to understand that he's not hurting just one person. He is hurting entire families and entire communities around the world. Again, I've already given my rebuttal to this. Funny how you never extend the same concern or courtesy for natural-born American families. But that is the end of the article, and I will provide a link to it. This is of course completely unworkable. You can't have a society where people are working against rational rules of being able to live. I actually was born in the state of New Jersey. My family moved to Ohio when I was 8 years old. So decades ago, I mean, I'm a millennial, so we moved to the state of Ohio from New Jersey because my parents got jobs in Ohio 25 years ago. One of my parents is retired now. The other is kind of just coasting along in a job. But When, it's not just with people who should carry documentation while they're working to become legal American citizens. Having your documentation, your birth certificate, your medical and insurance records, your some measure of family records. When natural disasters such as floods, earthquakes, landslides, wildfires, when these uh, hurricanes, when these hit and you have to flee your home and you have to live in FEMA camps or in temporary shelters for a little while you're trying to arrange new residence. A lot of people will say the reason they don't have a lot of that very important documentation with them is because this isn't what you think of when you have seconds to escape your house. That's true. And it's why it's important to actually keep, along with what what experts in survival will call survival kits. Some first aid, some rations, some emergency supplies. It's also good to. It's also actually prudent to prepare a folder or a case of your important documentation to carry with you in case you ever do come across an emergency like that. Um, because life happens. And so it's not just about immigrants, it's about, everyone should have a good hold on at least some emergency measures and documentation. No, I'm not going to show you what's on my birth certificate. That is private stuff. I am smarter than that. I just wanted to show you that I do still have it with me, and I still have a lot of my documentation, and I am working towards in the machinist class. That's taking up 4 months of my spring, to which my state seems to have gotten its own monsoon season in the recent years, because it's been raining almost every damn day, if not every other day. And Ohio has always been a rainy state, but not always to this extent. Maybe this is just an unusual year. I am not buying into any global warming right now because, as far as I've considered, climatology has completely blown its credibility. And if you want my explanation on that, just go look at my videos where I read the book Charles Lyell's Principles of Geology. So I know the people at the Daily Wire did make several episodes talking about this recently. I will try to keep updated. I will try to upload this video as soon as possible. I just need to get my new programs in order. So, see ya.